Elvis Presley. The 4-minute audition that almost killed rock and roll, 4 minutes. That's all it took for one man to nearly destroy the career of the biggest entertainer in history before it even started January 4th, 1954. A 19-year-old truck driver sat crying in a beat-up Lincoln Continental outside Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee. His dream had just been crushed in the most brutal way possible. What happened in those 4 minutes would haunt him for months, but what he did next changed music forever. Elvis Presley wasn't supposed to be there that day. He was supposed to be driving his delivery truck for Crown Electric Company, making $1.25 an hour and keeping his head down. But something inside him wouldn't let go of this crazy idea that his voice mattered. For 45 minutes he'd been sitting in that parking lot, hands trembling so violently he could barely grip the steering wheel. His daddy's good shirt was soaked with nervous sweat. Every few minutes he'd reach for the door handle, then pull back. What if they laughed at him? What if they told him what he secretly feared was true? That he was just another delusional kid with no talent and too much hope? At 3:47 p.m., something snapped. Elvis forced himself out of that truck before his courage completely evaporated. He grabbed his battered guitar and walked toward the door, his legs feeling like they might give out at any second. Inside, the walls were plastered with photos of real musicians, people who'd actually made it. Elvis felt like an imposter the second he stepped through that door. Marion Kiesker sat at the front desk, and she'd seen this look 1,000 times before, the wide eyes, the nervous sweat, the desperate hope mixed with terror. Elvis cleared his throat and asked about auditioning, stumbling over his words. Marion studied him for a moment. He looked ready to pass out, but there was something in his eyes that caught her attention. She asked what kind of music he sang, and Elvis gave her the answer he'd rehearsed. All kinds, whatever they needed. Then came the question that always tripped him up. Who did he sound like? Elvis hesitated. He told her the truth. He didn't sound like anybody. He just sounded like himself. Marion had heard that line before from tone-deaf dreamers who couldn't carry a tune. But the way Elvis said it, with this mixture of pride and absolute terror, made her curious. She told him about the test recording. $4 to cut a demo. Elvis's heart dropped. He had exactly $3.72 in his pocket. That money was supposed to buy gas so he could get to work the next day. When he stammered out his situation, Marion did something she rarely did. She bent the rules. Something about this kid made her want to give him a shot. In the tiny recording booth, Elvis put on headphones held together with electrical tape and prepared to sing My Happiness, his mama's favorite song. When Marion hit record, his voice came out shaky at first, but then something shifted. He closed his eyes and forgot about everything except the music. His voice found this groove that Marion had never quite heard before. Not pure country, not straight blues, but something caught right in between. Her eyebrows shot up. This kid was different. Elvis was midway through the second verse when the door suddenly flew open. Sam Phillips walked in looking annoyed, demanding to know what was going on. Marion explained it was just a test recording. Elvis pulled off the headphones, his heart sinking. He could read Sam's body language perfectly. This audition was over. But instead of kicking him out, Sam crossed his arms and told Elvis to play something else, something with more energy. Elvis's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped his guitar. He launched into That's All Right, a blues song by Arthur Crudup that he'd been obsessing over for months. He poured everything he had into those 4 minutes, every ounce of hope, every dream, every prayer, that this might be his one chance. But exactly 4 minutes in, Sam Phillips raised his hand and said those 2 words every performer dreads. That's enough. Sam looked at Elvis and asked what he was trying to do with his music, because what he'd just heard was confused. Elvis was mixing blues and country like they were the same thing, and that wasn't how the business worked. You had to pick a lane and stay in it. Elvis told him he just sang what he felt. Sam's response was brutal and direct. What Elvis felt wasn't commercially viable. Country radio wouldn't play him because he sounded too black. Black radio wouldn't play him because he was white and singing their music wrong. He was stuck in no man's land. Sam kept going. The guitar playing was adequate at best. The voice was interesting, sure, but interesting didn't sell records. People wanted familiar. They wanted to hear something they recognized. What Elvis was doing was too different, too weird. Sam's advice was simple and crushing. Stick to truck driving. Elvis had a steady job, right? He should keep that job because music wasn't going to work out. He didn't fit anywhere. Elvis walked out of that studio and made it about 30 feet into the parking lot before the tears started. He sat in his truck crying so hard he could barely breathe, still clutching his guitar. Everything Sam Phillips had said echoed in his head like a nightmare on repeat. Too different, too weird, doesn't fit anywhere. Stick to truck driving. Elvis had spent years believing he had something special. His mama had told him he was destined for greatness. Teachers had said his voice was unique, but now a real professional, someone who actually knew the music business, had told him the brutal truth. He wasn't good enough. He'd never be good enough. Elvis cried in that parking lot for nearly 2 hours. He watched the sun start to set, watched other people come and go from Sun Records, watched his dreams crumble into dust, but then something shifted. He wiped his eyes and looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked terrible, eyes red, face blotchy, hair messed up. But underneath all that, he saw something else. He saw his mama's face when she'd given him that guitar. He saw every person who'd ever believed in him. And Elvis got angry. Sam Phillips had said he was too different. Well, maybe being different was exactly what the world needed. Sam said he didn't fit anywhere. Well, maybe it was time to create a place where he did fit. Elvis started his truck and drove straight to his parents' apartment. When his mama saw his face, she knew immediately something had happened. Elvis told her everything. The audition, Sam's words, the devastating rejection. His mama pulled him into a hug and told him something that would change everything Sam Phillips telling him he didn't fit into the boxes he knew was Sam's limitation, not Elvis's. He wasn't supposed to fit into their boxes. He was supposed to build his own. Elvis wanted to believe her, but Sam's words were still fresh. His mama grabbed his face in her hands. There were a million singers who sounded like everybody else. The world didn't need another one of those. The world needed someone who sounded like nobody else. The world needed him. She reminded him of being rejected from the school choir and how that hadn't stopped him. This was the same thing. Sam Phillips didn't see what Elvis was yet, but that didn't mean what he wasn't valuable. It just meant Sam wasn't ready to understand it. That night, Elvis made a decision that would define his entire career. He took the $3.72 from his pocket and used it to buy a small notebook. On the first page, he wrote down exactly what Sam Phillips had said. Too different, too weird, doesn't fit anywhere, stick to truck driving. Then, underneath those words, Elvis wrote his own response. I'll show you what different can do. But here's where the story gets wild. 5 months later, in June 1954, Marion Kiesker called Elvis out of the blue. Sam Phillips had been looking for a white singer who could sing black music with authenticity, and Marion had never forgotten the kid with the shaky hands and the unusual voice. She told Elvis that Sam wanted him to come in and record something. Then she added something crucial. Sam didn't remember Elvis from the audition in January. She told him not to remind Sam, just come in and sing. Elvis showed up with his guitar and his heart pounding. Sam Phillips was there with 2 session musicians. They worked for hours trying different songs and styles, but nothing quite clicked. Then during a break, Elvis started fooling around with That's All Right, the exact same song he'd been singing when Sam had stopped him 5 months earlier and told him to stick to truck driving, but this time was different. Elvis wasn't singing to impress anyone or fit into a category. He was just playing, having fun, letting his natural style come out. Scotty Moore and Bill Black joined in, and suddenly the room came alive with a sound nobody had quite heard before. Sam Phillips rushed into the recording area, demanding to know what they were doing. Elvis stopped, afraid he'd messed up again. But Sam told him to do it again, exactly the same way. They recorded That's All Right. In one take. When it was done, Sam Phillips looked at Elvis with something like awe in his eyes and told him he didn't know what that was, but it was going to be huge. Elvis wanted to remind Sam that 5 months earlier he'd called this same style confused and not commercially viable, but he kept his mouth shut and smiled. That's All Right was released in July 1954. Within weeks, it was the most requested song on Memphis radio. Within months, Elvis was playing sold-out shows. Within 2 years, he was the biggest star in America. In 1956, Sam Phillips sold Elvis's contract to RCA for $35,000, the most money ever paid for a recording artist up to that point. During the contract negotiations, Sam pulled Elvis aside and admitted something that must have felt surreal. He told Elvis he remembered that test recording from January 1954 when he'd told him to stick to truck driving. Elvis pulled out his wallet and showed Sam the small notebook he still carried. On the first page were Sam's words about being too different, followed by Elvis's response about proving him wrong. Sam looked at that notebook and shook his head, admitting he'd been dead wrong. Elvis wasn't too different. Sam had been too scared of different. Elvis told him it was okay, that Sam had taught him something important that day. When someone tells you you're too different to succeed, they're really telling you they're too limited to understand. And that's not your problem. It's theirs. Elvis kept that notebook for the rest of his life. He'd pull it out whenever he felt discouraged, or when someone told him he couldn't do something. It reminded him that rejection isn't failure. It's just someone else's inability to see what you see in yourself. Sam Phillips's rejection in January 1954 could have ended Elvis's career before it started. Instead, it became the fuel that drove him to prove everyone wrong. The man who told Elvis he was too different to succeed ended up discovering the most successful entertainer in history, but only after Elvis refused to believe that being different was a weakness. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is having someone tell us we'll never make it, because that's when we find out what we're really made of. Elvis was told to stick to truck driving. Instead, he drove right past every person who doubted him and changed music history forever.